Aloha! Thank you for joining us here at TruthMadeEasy.com as we continue with our Apologetics Made Easy video training course. The title for this video is Revealing the Identity of the Beginner, Designer, and Moral Lawgiver. We're working through our 5 points here in our 5-point hand illustration. Point 1, God exists. 2, miracles are possible. 3, the New Testament is a good history book. 4, Jesus is God. And lastly, 5, the Bible is the Word of God. We're presently on point 1, proving that God exists. This, by the way, will be our last video on point 1 before we move on to point 2 and miracles. Well, now that we have finished all 3 arguments for the existence of God, let's now review a few of the main points of what we learned from each of these arguments in past videos. As we do, the identity of the beginner, designer, and moral lawgiver will become evident. With the cosmological argument, we focused on the universe's origin, that the universe had a beginning. Using the SURGE acronym developed by Norman Geisler and Frank Turek in the book, I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist, S standing for the second law of thermodynamics, U for the expanding universe, and so on. From SURGE, we learned that the universe is not eternal, as it had been believed by many for centuries. Instead, it had a beginning. And if it had a beginning, it had to have a beginner. We also picked up some clues about the nature of this beginner. From the Big Bang fireball explosion came not only the seeds of every galaxy, planet, and star, but also time, matter, and space. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing. No time, no matter, no space. After the Big Bang, there was something. There was time, matter, and space, our time-space material universe. We then asked the million-dollar question, who or what caused the Big Bang? And we determined that it was the beginner, or what we termed the first cause. Since the first cause beginner created time, matter, and space, we learned that it must be outside of time, matter, and space. Since this first cause created time, it must be timeless. Since this first cause created matter, it must be immaterial or invisible. And since this first cause created space, it must be non-spatial. In short, the first cause is infinite. We saw, using our box to represent the universe, or what we can call the natural world, that the first cause beginner was outside or beyond the natural world, that it was a supernatural being. What's interesting is that the Bible attributes these very same characteristics to God, a being who is timeless, immaterial, and non-spatial, a being who is infinite. With respect to God being timeless, we read in Psalm 90 verse 2, "From everlasting to everlasting, you are God." Regarding his being immaterial, John 4:24 tells us that God is spirit. And we learn in 1 Kings 8:27 that God is everywhere present. He is non-spatial, not limited to space. We read there in 1 Kings 8:27, "The heavens, even the highest heaven, cannot contain you." From the cosmological argument, we move then to the second argument, the teleological argument, the design of the universe and the design of life. In our studies, we saw how the universe and Earth have been precisely designed to provide just the right conditions to support human life, much like the life-enabling conditions found in a space shuttle traveling in the deadly conditions of space. And we learned that there are 122 specific anthropic constants that make life possible, and the odds of these constants occurring all by themselves is virtually zero. We also saw the design within living things, that within the simplest of cells, so one-cell creature, can be found the informational equivalent of 1,000 sets of encyclopedias, and within the human brain, the informational content of 20 million books. We learned that simple messages like mow the lawn and surfs up at Makapu had an intelligent cause. So surely the extraordinary complex messages found in DNA within the amoeba and also inside the human brain also had to have an intelligent cause. Since the universe and life display evidence of design, they too had to have a designer. Again, we turn to the Bible, where we find God making this statement, "It is I who made the earth and created mankind upon it. My own hand stretched out the heavens. I marshaled their starry hosts." Isaiah 45:12. Lastly, we looked at the moral law argument, which tells us that since we all have the moral law within our hearts, some call it conscience, which helps us to know right from wrong, since we have this moral law within us, someone must have put it there. There must be a moral lawgiver. When we talked about the moral law, we talked about Hitler and Mother Teresa, and about crooked and straight lines. We saw that just as we can't know something is crooked unless we know what is straight, we can't know what is wrong unless we know what is right. And the moral law within us acts like a moral ruler, helping us to differentiate between right from wrong, between the crooked and straight, between Hitler and Mother Teresa. In the Bible we find confirmation of the moral law. We read in Romans 2:15, "The requirements of the law are written on their hearts, their consciences also bearing witness." The character of God is further revealed in Habakkuk 1:13, where it is said of him that your eyes are too pure to look on evil. You cannot tolerate wrong. This God of the Bible is a morally perfect being. So there we have it, the three arguments, the cosmological, teleological, and moral law arguments. Now, let's tie everything together and identify this beginner, designer, and moral lawgiver. Norman Geisler and Frank Turek summarize things nicely for us in the book. We looked at this in an earlier video, but it bears repeating here now. They comment, "We know the first cause must be self-existent, timeless, non-spatial, and immaterial. Since the first cause created time, space, and matter, the first cause must be outside of time, space, and matter. In other words, he is without limits, or infinite, unimaginably powerful to create the entire universe out of nothing, supremely intelligent to design the universe with such incredible precision, personal in order to choose to convert a state of nothingness into the time, space, material universe, and impersonal force has no ability to make choices. These characteristics of the first cause are exactly the characteristics theists ascribe to God. Again, these characteristics are not based on someone's religion or subjective experience. They are drawn from the scientific evidence. A later comment in the book touches on the conclusion reached from the moral law argument. We read, "From the moral argument we know that God is absolutely pure. He is the unchangeable standard of morality by which all actions are measured. This standard includes infinite justice and infinite love." Now let's list some of the characteristics of the first cause Norman Geisler and Frank Turek have just described. Using science, reason, and philosophy, we have learned that the first cause is timeless, immaterial, non-spatial, supremely intelligent, self-existent, infinite, unimaginably powerful, and morally perfect. Now let's list the attributes that can be found in the Bible to describe God. As we do, we discover that he too is timeless, immaterial, non-spatial, supremely intelligent, self-existent, infinite, unimaginably powerful, and morally perfect. How's that for a match? The very same characteristics of the first cause, discovered from science, reason, and philosophy, are the very same attributes of the God of the Bible. In one of our earlier videos, when we were studying major worldviews and religions, we determined that a being with the characteristics just described would place God in the category of one of the theistic religions, there on the left side of our slide, with either Judaism, Christianity, or Islam. Geisler and Turek provide some additional comments on this theistic God. Theism is the proper term to describe such a God. Now, here is the amazing truth about these findings. The theistic God we have discovered is consistent with the God of the Bible, but we have discovered him without use of the Bible. We have shown through good reason, science, and philosophy, much can be known about the God of the Bible. We also see how the scientific evidence we have discovered thus far for the first cause lines up with the creation account found in Genesis 1:1, the very first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Again, back to this slide, we saw that the major world religions and worldviews fall into three main categories based on their beliefs and teachings. Our goal in this course has been to examine the evidence and determine beyond a reasonable doubt which is the one true religion or worldview. And we also determined that as we proceed through the evidence, different religions or worldviews would be removed from the list until there was just one religion or worldview that remained standing. Well, based on the cosmological, teleological, and moral arguments, and the evidence that indicates that God exists, we can now remove atheism from the list because atheism teaches that there is no God. And the group of pantheistic religions there in the center can also be removed from the list of potential candidates. Why? Because pantheistic religions teach that God is all, that God is the tree, God is the rock, God is the sun, God is you, God is me. But we have learned from the evidence that God made all things. He is not all things. God made the universe, but he is not the universe. So with atheism and pantheism removed from the list, the only remaining major religions are the theistic religions, Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. As we continue through this Apologetics Made Easy video training course and study the evidence about miracles, the New Testament, Jesus Christ, and the Bible, we will conclude, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Christianity is indeed the one true religion, and that the God of the Bible is the one true God. He alone is the beginner, designer, and moral lawgiver. Now we need to emphasize something very important about the religions that we have just removed from the list. As Norman Geisler and Frank Turek point out in the book, this does not mean that every teaching of a non-theistic religion is false or that there is nothing good in those religions. There is certainly truth and goodness in most world religions. It simply means that as a way of looking at the world, in other words, a worldview, any non-theistic religion is built on a false foundation. While some details may be true, the core of any non-theistic religious system is false. They are systems of error, even though they have some truth in them. Well, now that we have proved beyond a reasonable doubt that a theistic God exists, that concludes point 1, God exists, from our 5-point hand illustration. In our next video, we'll be moving on to point 2 and miracles. In it, we're going to see that God wishes to communicate with us here on earth, and he uses miracles to help us to determine which messages are really from him.